is rugby legend, and he'll hate me describing him like this, rugby legend Brian O'Driscoll, right? So over 140 international caps, captained our country over 80 times, and I think is the highest scorer of all time. But when I mention things like this, he thinks, well, that's pre-2014. And I'm a long time out of retirement. And I was very lucky to have Brian on the Potential Squared podcast back in 2019. And we talked a lot about kind of life and the learnings that he had in rugby. And it was very, very insightful. But I actually don't want to go anywhere there today. What I want to do is I want to touch on what I see as the more interesting side of Brian O'Driscoll. And that is to look at how he has taken the insights that he has gotten about world-class culture from within the sporting field and what he's been able to apply in the last 7 years since he's left sport. So in the last 7 years, Brian has set up his own business. He's invested in a number of business. He's collaborated with a number of large corporates in terms of helping them with their business. And he sits on a number of boards, including World Rugby. So he's very active in a number of different areas. And the thing that I find really interesting now is over the years, I've heard lots of times people talk about how things work inside of high-performing sports teams, right? But for me, I'm interested in the things that he has been able to apply in life after sport. So you're very welcome, Brian. It's great to have you, right?
Thanks, Pete. Cheers. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. So I might just jump straight in and say, listen, since 2014, you stepped out of rugby, you're at the top of your game, and then life after. What have you been able to take in learnings and insights around high-performing cultures? What have you been able to use in the last 7 years as you've kind of crafted the next kind of chapter in your life?
I think you take an awful lot. I think, the first 15 years of my adult life were doing one thing, and then I saw a variety of different cultures over that time, an evolution of different cultures from good to fair to very good, which has been subsequently sustained. And so, you understand, when you work from a, probably a poor culture initially, and maybe you're not fully aware of it until, you are constantly the bridesmaid, you come up short, and then all of a sudden you realize something's not right, and then you work it out, and it's kind of amalgamation of a number of components makes you discover that you've got to change things to get to a successful place or put yourself in a position to be successful. I guess when you understand that journey, then now in the second iteration of my career, it's trying to find all of the things, try and speed past that initial learning process and just try and discover and fast track that good culture in what you do second time round, which is ultimately what I've tried to do over the last 6 or 7 years, and continue to evolve. I think that's the thing that I've heard with Patrick and with John and Cian. The culture is an evolutionary piece. It's never, if you remain stagnant, time passes you by.
So give us a couple of things that are close to your heart in terms of high performing culture. So what are the things that sit now? We heard the entrepreneurs earlier speak about they have this blank sheet of paper that they're at an early stage in their journey. They get to create the culture that they want, and they get to draw on the best from wherever they've been exposed to. So what have you done, like the culture of you now and your business and your approach? What are the things at the heart of that?
Yeah, I think there's obvious things that you want. Within culture, you want good leadership, you want clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve. But there's a couple of things below that I think are really relevant. The last thing in my business that I want to do is micromanage the team that work with me, and we've got a really, really small team. There's myself, so my sister Susan, who's worked with me for about 8 or 9 years, and I've got a PA, Steph, and then we pull in different skill sets where needs be. So when you've got a skeleton team like that, If you put 50% of their nose out of joint, if you annoy or antagonize one person, that's 50% of your workforce, of the people that are in regular communication with you.
You've gone from all male to all female, and Rena spoke to the panel with the female entrepreneurs, and we it's important to get the right balance in terms of culture.
It totally is, and when you come from a male dominated environment, maybe with the occasional female in a marketing role or in a physio role, but pretty much everyone else is male is male dominated. So there's small aspects like HR. All of a sudden, that there's no real HR in rugby. It's you say what you want, say what's on your mind, and you shoot from the hip, and that's just the way you go. Whereas then you come into an ordinary working world, in the corporate world, and there's particular ways for things to be done, to understand, days off, holidays, maternity leave. On both fronts, I've had to encounter that and deal with it. And what do you do when you don't know? You bring in skill sets from outside. I'm lucky. One of my wife's friends is head of HR in a big corporate, and so she's been able to keep me informed as to what's acceptable and so on. So everything, again, that's part of the evolution of understanding and learning and accepting. And the thing is, when you've got a small team like that, happiness is everything and contentment is everything, because if they're enjoying what they're doing, they're going to deliver their best performances. If they're unhappy, for whatever reason it might be, well, I've got a real problem, because it's very hard for one of them to cover the other one. And like I said, the fall off when one of those two individuals that work so close with me isn't producing their best is significant. So I've got to make sure that my environment is very friendly, that it's warm, that we still have values that are valuable to us. You talk about the value piece the whole time, and what our values, words on a wall, or do they actually offer something to your business? So the values that I have and that we have are all very similar, to make sure we're pulling in the same direction. So it's always a work in progress. There's always new challenges. No one likes confrontation, but there's ways and means of delivering messages, of showing that leadership, of being honest, of looking for feedback, of giving feedback. So these are all movable parts.
And tell me this, Brian, when you come from a position that you've been at the top of the mountain, right, in terms of the sporting career, and then you go to a position where you're starting from scratch in terms of a new world. One of the things, we've heard collaboration come up again and again, and I guess there's a vulnerability or a confidence that someone needs to have, and both of them, to actually collaborate well. And you need to realize the stuff that you don't actually know, but that you're willing to ask others to. And you have a small business, so you got to be able to say, listen, I don't have a clue. Now, for a long time, that I don't have a clue was not exactly seen as a position of strength for a business leader or an entrepreneur. And, there was a lot of fake it till we make it, et cetera, et cetera. But more and more, we're seeing people say, no, I just don't have a clue, but I need to find somebody. So I need to actually put the hand up, say, I don't know the answer. Well, let's go find it. Was that something that came easy to you?
Well, to be honest with you, it did, because, and I know we're not talking about rugby career, but so much of what I've discovered and understand and have brought forward has come from my rugby playing career, and particularly from my captaincy. And the reality was, when I came in as a 23-year-old as captain of the Irish team, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And so I had to look to senior leaders. I had to look for advice. I had to make sure that people were watching my back, that I didn't put a foot out of place, that when I did make errors, that I was picked up on it, and that I was getting regular feedback. So it became a simple part to plug and play into the second business as well. I want all of those aspects. Like everybody else, I don't like negative feedback, but it's one thing that I did learn from my previous career, is that I was given feedback whether I wanted it or not. And if I wanted to play the following weekend, I had to change certain things. And it's the same and different in that if I get feedback now that I don't love, if I don't change that, I'm going to have a workforce that is a little bit put out or isn't going to deliver exactly what I'm looking for. So I've got to listen to them as much as they've got to listen to me. If I want them to hang on my word, well, then I've got to hang on their word as well, and properly understand how they tick and how we as a collective work as a unit. So it's I've always loved the team environment. It's how I've reveled. You know, you want to stand out as an individual, maybe in your performance, but ultimately, you know, in all the things that I love most now, it's about the collective, that team of pitching together, no egos, no Mayfainers, of all trying to pull together and being generous with one another. I think that's a really important part of good culture, is a generosity with one another. You know, the generosity of, you know, people can talk. That's not a financial piece. It's about time. It's about understanding, you know, getting what's going on at home, and investing in them outside of the workplace, where, you know, you get to understand how someone ticks. And so when they're having an off day, or, you know, something at home is going wrong, well, then you give them a little bit of rope. You let them go and take some time away. And I think that comes back in spades. So there's all of these aspects have been, you know, constantly evolving over the last, you know, 7 or 8 years, and I'm sure will continue to do so.
Yeah, we jump back into a few of those. So feedback,
Okay.
right? The ability to take and ability to give. And you said, listen, I don't really like it, but, you know, I realize it's important. Any ways, any advice you'd give in terms of, you know, how you actually, because we all have that initial, you get the feedback and you have that initial, oh, I don't really like it, but then, you know, you have to take it, right? And then you have to process it, right? How does your brain process kind of feedback?
I think once it's not personal, I don't mind it. Once
Okay.
it's not someone having a cut off you for the sake of it, it's for the benefit of progressing the business in a positive trajectory. I think that's got to be a good thing. You know, it's funny. When I started out doing TV work with BT, I was totally inexperienced, and the hardest part was when I started doing commentary. And when I began doing that, I did it a couple of days, and then I went to, you know, management, I went to the production crew and said, okay, I need some feedback from that. And they're like, oh yeah, no, you're really good. You're really good. I was like, oh, come on. I'm a big boy here. I need actual work-ons so I can go and get better. Because if you don't tell me where my shortcomings are, well, then how am I going to actually improve for the next time? So we'll all benefit from that. You know, that's something that is always a focus. When I hear from my sister or from Steph around something that, you know, is a miss or is awry, it's not always easy and palatable to hear it, but provided you don't, you know, put up a blocker immediately and argue the point, if you process and accept it and understand what their thinking is and put yourself in their shoes, you know, and even if you don't fully agree with it, try and find some happy medium, some halfway house where you both can accept a kind of a neutral position. At least you can progress from there. The last thing someone wants to be is dictated to, is that, you know, leadership is about forceful, is about this is what we do. Dictatorship, that's not leadership. Leadership is about giving control to other people as well, letting them do their thing, let them work as best they can, but also them coming in and ultimately the final decision lies with me. But I value the opinion of others, and I'll take on board what they are saying to me, and I'll make my overall decision on the back of all of that information assimilated.
Right. And I think the wonderful thing there is if you have, because probably the key to that feedback is having a culture that promotes that. So having a kind of an open and honest culture where people have high levels of trust and respect for each other, that actually people know they can give feedback, you know, and won't be looked upon, or looked down upon, or the likes, for giving that kind of feedback. And that's always a challenge for business leaders and entrepreneurs. It's always a challenge because, you know, a lot of people are looking up to them as the kind of leader and the boss. So to create an environment where people can freely give feedback upwards is really, really important. The other thing for you, right? So you seem to have that environment. You've created that environment. And obviously you're coming from sport where there's the feedback can be ruthless and very open and very honest and very direct, right? for yourself then, right? So you're getting feedback from below. How do you get feedback from the side? So sometimes it's lonely as a business leader or an entrepreneur, right? So how do you get feedback from people outside your organization?
Yeah, it's you've got to go and inquire, you got to go and ask, don't you? No one's people from outside your organization. It's rare enough that they're going to offer it, themselves, because they don't feel it's their place. It's similarly like you're talking to your workforce or your crew, your staff. A great way to get feedback is by asking for it first before you hand it out. So before going into a meeting, going, okay, let's talk a bit about feedback, about how things are going. But before we do anything, can you tell me what I need to improve on? Where am I going well? Where can I get better? How can I modify and streamline things for us to improve as a collective? What are my work-ons, but what are my real strengths as well? So it's not all negative. And feedback sometimes is perceived to be a negative connotation. It needs to be positive at the same time. It needs to be delivered. Sometimes, and dropping an email going, that was a brilliant piece of work. It's fab. I thought you dealt with that. Even the wording of an email, something could be a little bit sensitive. I'll sometimes drop an email to one or other and go, that was very well dealt with, excellent. And just leave it at that. It doesn't have to be, it was very well dealt with, except, here's a side note. Just so feedback has to be good and bad. And if you want to generate an environment where feedback is encouraged and accepted, I think you first and foremost have to be willing to take it from your crew before you hand it out. Now, laterally, you got to go and inquire, and people might be a bit reticent to be over analytical of you or over critical of you. But if you do go and say, like I did to the BT production crew, saying, listen, I can't actually improve or get better unless you tell me how where I'm at or how you're perceiving me to be. Well, then we're just lying to each other, and then this is a pointless conversation. So be honest, be credible, and without being personal. I think no one can have an issue with any feedback if on the basis of those pointers.
Yeah, and it's come up again and again, and the concept of mentorship, and not just mentors, but to have multiple mentors as ways as for people around you that can just give you advice as you grow and develop, but people who you trust and respect and who can give kind of feedback in. And I know that's something that you've used in the past as well as a way of continuing to develop yourself.
Totally. Like, you and I have chatted, and going with an open mind to the advice you might get from people that are experienced and have achieved a lot, and have had disappointments and had failures as well, and for them to help you avoid the pitfalls is a massive component in learning and developing. Sometimes as well, I think I could probably be pretty hard on myself and expect very high standards, and sometimes when you don't achieve them, you feel as though you're a bit of a disappointment, or something's been a bit of a failure. But sometimes, from a mentor perspective as well, and I guess I've done it myself with other rugby players and with people that have asked my opinion and my advice. Sometimes it's about taking stock and going, there's loads of great stuff going on. I'm always trying to chase the next thing. How do you modify? How do you evolve? How do you get better? How do I, look for, to plan for 5 years time? What's that next iteration of me? Sometimes you need to look and go, wow, you got lots going on, there's some interesting investment stuff going on. You're contracted to a couple of different broadcasters in TV and radio. We've got different, ambassadorships going on, and sitting on board. So you kind of go, you take it for granted until you sit back, or someone independent goes and says, hang on, calm down a second. Yeah. Get off the wheel for a second. All's going well. So maybe just relax and enjoy it, and enjoy the process as well. It's all well and good trying to find an end goal, but you got to enjoy that journey and getting there as well. And it's easy me telling other people that, but sometimes the hardest person to tell is yourself.
Yeah, no, listen, you're talking to your brother in that regard. I suffer from that from time to time, and even Patrick spoke about it in the first presentation today, where he talked about, the process and the journey. that they're the important things to enjoy, as opposed to it all being destination based. Because I think as ambitious people, what you can tend to do, and entrepreneurs have this trait, is what they can do is they can move the goalposts before they actually get to achieve their goals. So I want to achieve X, but by the time I get close to X, I've already moved the target to Y. And then you never feel you actually hit the target because you keep moving the target. And I think it is something that sometimes we need to be good to ourselves. You talk about happiness, and some of the entrepreneurs earlier spoke about happiness and kindness and these kind of words. And I wrote a piece that summed up some of the insights we got from the physical entrepreneur experience in Ballymaloe a number of weeks ago during the week. And the first point I had was that kindness belongs at work. Right. And I see that coming out from, what you're talking about, understanding what's going on in people's worlds, making sure they're happy, right? Making sure they like what they're doing, making sure that you're not micromanaging, making sure you're empowering them. And even in a small team, which is the same as a number of the entrepreneurs.
I would hate, Pete, if my work crew felt as though it was a total disconnect from their other world, that it was something that they're trying to get through from Monday to Friday and couldn't wait for 5 o'clock on a Friday evening to arrive so they could just get away from it. That would be a nightmare scenario for me. I want them to be able to enjoy it. I want us to have fun. I want us to have a laugh. I want us to do serious business as well. But during the process, we have to show a bit of our personality. We have to have crack in doing so. And you can, that doesn't mean that there won't be speed bumps along the way. Of course there will, but gone are the days where work was come along, check in you go, 9 o'clock on a Monday or 8 o'clock on a Monday, and then Friday comes and you breathe a sigh of relief. I just don't want that in my environment. I want it to feel as though it's an enjoyable aspect that you get a lot out of and you get satisfaction and you deliver yourself. I think one of the things that I'm always chasing is purpose. I want to add value to the world, to the things that I'm involved in. And I know the team that works with me is no different. They want to be able to go and put together projects and not have me looking over their shoulder and watching their every move, that they come back to me with a piece of business signed, sealed and delivered, ready to go. And that's on them. And that is the purpose piece. And I think the more fun you can have in the environment that you work in, the better your work you're going to deliver.
It's funny when I hear you talk, and some people talk about culture, and in the middle of the conversation about culture, start talking about kind of strategy. And it's almost like chicken and egg. Well, I have this strategy to do X. So to do that, I would have to develop this culture. And I kind of think, well, hang on a second, what's the culture you want to build? And that will help you achieve whatever goal you want in terms of strategy. And sometimes people put it the other way around. And I think that can take it further away from the person and can move it towards the goal. And I think it has the purpose vision, it has to start with the person for people to really buy into it and engage with it. Patrick spoke earlier about, you have to be there for your people. So, they can believe in you. Right.
If you're not leading it yourself, if you don't believe it, the transparency is clear. People are very smart now. Their emotional intelligence levels have gone through the roof, and so people can identify when you're a fraud and when you don't believe what you're saying. So culture has to be authentic, it has to be real, and it has to be true to you. And you can't cut and paste culture. You just can't. I know Patrick was saying that earlier on, it really resonated with me. You take certain aspects of different cultures. It's like I did with my captaincy. I took different traits of different captains that I was under and amalgamated them into a style that I thought would work for me. And the same works with culture, because every business, every environment is different because of their sector, because of the individuals involved. So you have to have a malleability to those factors to create your culture. It's really important in culture as well that personality is still allowed to shine. If you limit and inhibit people too much, I don't think you'll create the culture you're looking for. So personality still has to have an ability to be able to come through, but ultimately work in the same direction as everybody else in your environment.
And that takes time, doesn't it? But like to build something that actually unifies people really tight. And sometimes we look from the outside of high performance sports teams and look at those kind of dressing room moments and those on the pitch moments, and we think, look at the unity of that group of people. But yet, some of the individual flair and spark that goes on in terms of making sure that when you're bringing people together, you're not killing the individuality. And I think the exact same exists in business. And I think you're right. We need to protect that individual. And I think the thing that's coming up for me is it takes time. You have to be conscious of this every day. You can't schedule this. We have this joke in Broadlake where we can't schedule fun. We can't say on the first Friday of every month, we're going to have fun. And then every other day, well, that's just another day. So
yeah, we used to have a thing called compulsory fun. It was like, oh no, you can't have compulsory fun. There's no such thing. You just can't contrive, can't force it. So it has to be something that is an everyday thing. It's part of, for me, the fun aspect was a big bit of the previous career. And why would you want that removed? I've got to look forward and have a laugh and be able to disconnect. And I sit opposite Steph on a desk here at my house, and to be able to just switch in and switch out and have a laugh. And I know that it's funny. I had a conversation with her the other day. She's due to go on maternity leave in the next few weeks, which I'm somewhat devastated about. And she's I asked her about coming back, and she said, well, it was very different than previously. She said I probably was struggling work-wise, but I'm looking forward to coming back to work. I was like, come on, is that just for your boss? She goes, no, I enjoy coming in. And that is music to my ears, that I want her to feel as though there's an environment, and first of all, she enjoys her work, but there's an environment for her to actually look forward to coming back in time. I'm sure she's also looking forward to not coming in and seeing my mush across the table for a while, but hopefully we'll see her, in due course.
No, that's great. And what's coming up for me again is that it starts with the person. It's like, a lot of it is how you actually build that kind of environment in terms of that kind of kindness, that unity, et cetera, to achieve whatever your goals are. And I think if you build a team strong enough and attracting the right people that believe in your kind of purpose, your vision, and the culture you want to adopt, then you can achieve anything, right? You can, if you decide, and particularly with a business like yours, which you have a lot of diversification. And I think that's the beauty. A lot of what you've spoken about has been stuff you've taken from sport, but also stuff that you've identified that wasn't as prevalent maybe in sport, right? Or at least not, on the face of it, in terms of, words like kindness and words like happiness and stuff, which I'm sure you were kind to each other, but maybe just in different kind of ways. Are there, as you've exposed yourself to different businesses, whether it be your own business, whether it be the startups you're investing in, whether it be the big corporates that you're working with, 7 years out of the game now, do you look back and say, actually, there's some stuff I'm learning in this chapter of my life that actually it would have helped us being better back in that chapter of my life?
Oh, I think a really obvious one, in this corporate world that seems to have a crack, and I'm sure it's a constant work on, but is inclusivity and diversity. We kind of would have felt as though, oh yeah, we're inclusive, but if you think about it, even from from a percentage of the population that are gay, that isn't reflected within the sporting world. So what's wrong in our environment that we haven't been able to create a comfortable workplace for 10% of the population to come out and say they're gay? The Australian footballer, I can't remember what his name was, Josh Cavallo. Other than Gareth Thomas, I think they're the two only gay currently playing sports people at their time that came out. So why aren't we creating an environment where that is okay? So I do think the inclusivity and the diversity piece that corporates are really ahead of the curve comparatively to sports teams in that regard. But I do feel as though in most team environments that the crossovers are relatively seamless. And I do think the one thing that I do feel that the sports teams have the edge on corporate teams is that investment in one another, in that time and energy and interest in your work colleagues. You're not prying, you're not trying to find out their deepest, darkest secrets. You're actually trying to get to know them, to create a bond, to connect. So the sum of your parts will be significantly greater than the two of you on your own. And then if all teams work that way, it's a very, very powerful thing. And we needed it from a rugby perspective. I needed to know that guys were going to have my back, because you're going out to battle. And if I don't feel as though someone has my back, well, we're in serious trouble. So that's why we invest in each other. But I think corporates could learn an awful lot about understanding about how their work colleagues tick. What's going on in their families. What do people know? Their work colleagues' kids' names, what they're into. All of that stuff, all that small talk at the small chat at the coffee machine, that counts. That actually is building the development of your relationship and creating a bond, and that all is positively feeding into the overall output of your business. I've no doubt about that.
It's a lovely kind of sum up of kind of where we are over the last couple of hours, because we've talked about culture, and we've talked about culture. It needs to start at the top, but it really needs to swell and engage the people in the organization for it to be powerful. And then the third most important thing is that it needs to evolve and grow over time. And it's lovely to finish up with this conversation, because for me, what's coming up for me is that, we can have it at the top, but the challenge is really the engagement in the middle. And if we engage well with the culture in the middle, then we have a better chance of it growing and evolving to keep pace with where we want to go, and you develop a kind of a real unity. But as opposed to the engagement in the middle happening in a kind of corporate speak, it should be far more human. It's where we actually connect into people's lives, connect with the people around us, so we actually know them. And no time has that been more important than now, after what we've been through for the last 2 years. So Brian, I'd like to thank you for your time this morning. I know you're a busy man. We really, really appreciate having you here on the Entrepreneur Experience. And I'd like to hand over to Michael O'Connor, the head of Cork BIC, to bring the event to a close. Thank you.